I think that's deliberate.
All right, well, let's talk to one of the people who makes these decisions. Illinois Republican Congressman Adam Kinzinger is with me now from Capitol Hill. Congressman, thanks for joining us. Quite an afternoon on the House Foreign Affairs Committee. I want to get into Russia with you as well, but obviously anybody from Congress who steps in front of that mic is getting the first question about the chairs of the Senate Intel Committee, Republican and Democrat, saying there's no evidence of wiretapping at Trump Tower. Your thoughts?
Yeah, this isn't any surprise to me, or really, to be honest with you, probably no surprise to anybody out here. I think it was a long stretch to say that, you know, President Obama wiretapped, and I think the White House really ought to explain this. And as you've seen them try to step it back a little bit, I think the president seemed to have doubled down, and that's a concern. So in seeing this, yeah, it looks like there's no evidence of it. That's kind of my impression, too. All right. And let's just move on.
And by the way, in moving on, I may have to interrupt you when Sean Spicer shows up, but let's talk about the thing I was just talking to Robbie Mook about, and that is that you have business to do at Congress. You got a health care bill, and you have a budget to deal with, and you've got Russia to deal with, and that is a matter for you. And by the way, your budget that you guys are being presented with shows a 29% reduction in State Department funding. That's got to be of concern to you.
Yeah, I think it's a non-starter. As a military pilot, look, I can tell you a 2,000-pound GPS-guided bomb is very expensive, and it's a lot cheaper to do diplomacy. The folks in the State Department, and in many cases the unsung heroes of foreign policy, it's important to make sure they're well resourced in order for conflict prevention, war prevention, and so I think that's going to have a hard time really getting any traction out here because they've been doing more with less for a long time, and we're already under sequester in the first place.
Are you, by the way, able to get a hearing when you tell people it's not an either-or game, it's not military or diplomacy, it can be both?
Yeah, I think so, but you've got to be willing to explain it. You know, you go to Liberia, for instance, which I was in fairly recently, and you see what the UN or what the State Department is doing there to stop that from devolving back into a massive civil war, which it's been in the past. And so it's those kinds of things. People examples of the good work that's being done and how that frankly saves us. The next generational war on terror, bringing that next generation not to become ISIS fighters, but instead to have opportunity. In many cases, that's done through State Department agencies like that.
Nikki Haley said on the Today Show that the president shouldn't be as friendly with Russia as he is. She said, quote, "We should never trust Russia." You got to deal with Russia. This is all unfolding. Yesterday we found out the Yahoo hack situation could be allegedly tied directly to FSB. Donald Trump is a little inconsistent on what he says about Russia. What are you thinking about how we need to approach this very complicated issue?
Well, I think we have to see him as a strategic competitor. They're intending to rebuild the old Soviet empire piece by piece. We need to be aware of that. We need to reassure NATO. We need to encourage NATO to make their 2% GDP commitments while we continue to make our commitment as well. And frankly, Vladimir Putin will advance until he hits a wall, and he has not hit that wall yet. So I think being there to put that wall down, we're not looking for war, we're not looking for conflict, but we do have to stand up.
I think typically NATO has been that wall. NATO in Eastern Europe has been that wall, and we have sent some mixed messages. If you're Lindsey Graham and John McCain, the message you've sent is we're here with you all the way to the end. And if you're Donald Trump, it's like maybe we are, maybe we aren't. Who knows?
Yeah, it's been a little inconsistent, obviously, from this administration, from the words there, but the actions on Russia have actually been pretty solid and pretty good. And when we see Nikki Haley come out and reaffirm NATO and things like that, and talk about Crimea, and Crimea is not part of Russia, it's part of Ukraine, those are important messages. Look, I give some of this potentially to that Donald Trump has not been in politics before. He's new to that, and he kind of looks at this as, hey, I can strike a grand deal. The problem is every administration's tried to strike a grand deal with Russia, and it's bit them pretty badly.
Congressman, let me ask you about health care for a second. I talked to somebody yesterday in your shoes. Said the left digs in, they don't want to compromise. The right digs in, doesn't want to compromise. The fiscal conservatives say this is a non-starter. There is an answer to health care somewhere if enough people would talk to each other. It doesn't seem to be happening. People on other sides of this conversation don't really seem to be talking about it. It all seems to be politics and who's getting the win and who's got more support. How do we fix this?
Well, look, I mean, even at my party, right before this bill was even released, the usual suspects were out, you know, bad-mouthing it on television, saying it's not conservative enough or whatever. We need conversations. We have to have the dialogue. Look, I happen to think this is a pretty good bill, and it can be improved on. There can be some changes. That's fine. We're willing to discuss it. But I think we need to get back in politics in general to where both sides of the aisle can take a deep breath, recognize we're not going to agree on stuff all the time, maybe not even most of the time, but at least getting back to having grown-up conversations instead of this like left-right food fight that occurs all the time.
Congressman, good to see you. Thank you so much for spending some time with us.
Yeah, you bet. Thanks. Take care.
Congressman Adam Kinzinger, Republican of Illinois. We're keeping